Hey everyone, it's Kay and welcome to Kay Crochet. Today we'll be making a sweater. You'll need size 4 acrylic yarn in the color forest green or any dark green or any color of choice, and you'll also need a 5mm crochet hook. Alright, let's get started. And now we'll be starting at the ribbing. The way that I start off my ribbing is I'm just going to measure around my wrist just to get an idea of how long it's going to be, and we start off with a simple slip knot. And once I'm finished my slip knot, I insert the hook, and we're going to chain 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And of course we start from the second chain of the hook. So we're going to skip that chain that's closest to the hook and insert into the second chain from the hook. We'll be doing half double crochets all the way down. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the loop, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over, pull through all 3. Once again, yarn over, insert your hook into the chain, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over, pull through all 3 just to get a nice half double crochet. Our whole sweater will be worked in half double crochets. It gives us a really nice look at the end. And you're just going to continue half double crocheting all the way down. We should have a total of 7 half double crochets all the way at the end. But remember, if you'd like a longer wrist ribbing, you can just add more into your foundation chain or less into your foundation chain depending on how wide or how small you'd like your wrist ribbing to be. I don't want my wrist ribbing to fold, so I made it at the exact size that I want when I wear the sweater. If you like it a little longer, just add a little more chains as you keep going down in your foundation chain. All right, now we're at the end. You're just going to chain 2. That'll give us the length for our row into the next one as we continue down. So you're going to chain 1 and then chain 2. Turn your work. And we're going to be working into the back loop only. So see how there's 2 loops? You want to work into the one that's the furthest away from you. The one that's closest to you is the front loop, and the one that's further away from you is the back loop. We're doing another half double crochet. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop, and then yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. All right, and you're just going to repeat that until you get to the end of the row. So just a half double crochet into the back loops only. This is how we're going to do the nice look on the ribbing. The wrist ribbings are always worked into the back loops to give you that nice look of a ribbing. It's actually one of my favorite to do in crochet. I love the way that ribbings look. It kind of gives it a knit feel. All right, so we're just doing 4 and now we're on the 5th. Oh, sorry, this is the 5th. Now that's the 6th. And then the last one is the 7th. And you're just going to do this as a repeat. The repeat is chain 2, turn your work, and then half double crochet down 7 if you have the same numbers as me. If you have it smaller or less than me, or smaller or more than me, then just do it as much as you put into your foundation chain. And you want to measure against your wrist, and that's how long you're going to keep working into your rows. Okay, so I went ahead and worked up the ribbing. This is about 15 rows or 14 centimeters, and I just double check it around my wrist to make sure it's the size that I want, and then I'm going to close it. The way that I close it is through both of the back loops. I'm going to slip stitch them together. You can either sew it together, slip stitch the back loops, slip stitch both loops, or slip stitch the front loops. Oh, that's a tongue twister. I'm going to slip stitch the back loops because that's what I'm used to. So as you can see, I'm inserting my hook into the first back loop, and then I'm going to insert it into the second back loop, and then just a nice slip stitch of yarn over and then pull through all the loops. I'm going to repeat this 7 times until I get all the way to the end of the stitch, end of the row. Once we're finished, I do want to mention that the way that we're going to work this arm is to finish the complete arm first. If you don't want to do that and you'd rather finish the wrist ribbing first for the second one, you can go ahead and just repeat the wrist ribbing pattern. It's the exact same thing for the other arm, but I like to work the complete arm first and then go back to it. And here I am at the second last stitch, and then I slip stitch into the last one. Sometimes it can be a little finicky. As you can see, I struggled here a little bit to get it. And there we go. And you're just going to fasten off. So the way that I fasten off is just I cut the extra yarn and then I pull it through and just pull tight to make sure it doesn't get loose through that loop. And then I'm just going to flip it over. And now we're going to start on the arm. For the arm, what's going to happen is that every 2 or 3 stitches, I'm going to increase. I'll walk you through the exact number that I did, but I do want to mention that it's really just a freehand type of thing. So you just increase every 3 or 4 or every 2 after every 2 half double crochets if you're not doing a size medium like I am. So I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch. And then I insert my hook anywhere into the top of the wrist ribbing. And then I take my slip stitch and I pull it through. You can go ahead and chain 2 and this will act as a half double crochet. This will be an increase, so I'm going to half double crochet once again into that same area where I had the slip stitches. Sorry, where I had the chain 2. So over here, I'm doing a half double crochet and that'll give you 2 half double crochets into that same stitch because again, that chain 2 acts as a half double crochet. And now another half double crochet into the next. And I'm also weaving in that end as I go just to make things easier. So that is the 3rd half double crochet. Half double crochet into the 4th stitch. And then another half double crochet for the 5th. And for the next stitch, it'll be an increase. So the 6th and 7th stitch will be an increase stitch. Then for the next 2 stitches, just a normal half double crochet. So the 8th and 9th stitches are both just normal half double crochet. Then the next stitch will be an increase. So the 10th and 11th stitch will be an increase. So I'm about to do that right now. And this will be the increase. That is the 10th. And that is the 11th, both in the same. And then in the next 2 stitches, just normal half double crochet. So the 12th and 13th stitches is a half double crochet. Then an increase, so the 14th and 15th stitch will be an increase. And then the next 2 stitches will be just a normal half double crochet, no increase. That'll take us up to 17 stitches. Then an increase into the 18th stitch. So now you have the 18th and 19th into the same stitch, so an increase. And now you're going to half double crochet into the next 4 stitches. So the 20th, the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd will just be normal half double crochets. After you finish that, it'll be an increase stitch into the 24th stitch. And since you're putting 2 into that stitch, it'll bring you up to 25 stitches. So the 24th and the 25th are an increase stitch. Then the next stitch, the next 2 stitches are just normal half double crochet. So the 26th and the 27th are both half double crochets. Then you'll have a increase stitch. So the 28th and the 29th are both going to is going to be an increase. So the 28th is an increase, bring you up to the 29th stitch. And then you'll have 2 more increases, which will bring you to the 34th stitch. Since it's 2 increases, you have 30, 31, and then 32 and 33 bring you up to the 34th. And then you're going to just half double crochet 5 down, and that will bring you to the end of the row. Again, these are just estimates. What I'm basically doing is every 4th stitch, I'm basically increasing. It's not exact, it's just what I did to increase as I went. You don't have to be super exact here, just a couple increases here and there to get you to the length that you'd like around your arm, and you can measure it around just to make sure. And here I'm just putting in the last half double crochet. Now you're going to find the 2 stitches we made in the beginning, the 2 chains, and then skip those 2 chains and enter it into the first half double crochet. So that'll be the 3rd stitch if you're counting up, if you're skipping the 2 chains. The repeat is just going to be half double crochets all the way around. And for me, I have 38 stitches. You may have more stitches or less depending on how big or how small you decide to do the sweater. So we're going to keep repeating half double crochets until you get to about 10 centimeters after your elbow. The way that I did it is I put my palm right where my elbow is and then measured how far away it was from my elbow, and that was about 10 centimeters. Or what else you can do is just keep crocheting up until you reach about the bottom of your armpit. Now I'm going to meet you back after I crochet all the way up until the bottom of my armpit. And as you can see over here, I just finished crocheting. Mine is about 28 centimeters, which is roughly 22 rounds to finish to get to the length that I wanted. You can make yours a little bit longer if you'd like a longer sleeve. Mine is an exact sleeve, so it won't go over my wrist. It'll rest right on my wrist. So if you'd like a little bit longer, you can crochet a couple more rounds. The next round is going to be an increase round, and the repeat is going to be 6 half double crochets and 1 increase. I'm also going to be adding a stitch marker for this one just so that I know which round I increased on. The way that I do a stitch marker is I just use a loose yarn piece. And now that we have that marked, we can get started. Here's the first half double crochet right into both loops. That's 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th one is going to be an increase, so we're going to put 2 half double crochets into the same stitch. Now all you want to do is repeat this all the way around until you're at the end. For me, I'd repeated this about 5 times, and that left me with 3 single crochets, half double crochets to do at the end. Because since this wasn't an even amount of rounds, it wasn't going to do the same repeats, so you might have a couple loose ends at the end. All you want to do is just do however many half double crochets you have left after you've repeated the 6 half double crochets and 1 increase. Again, it doesn't really matter about exacts here. It's mostly just looking at making it a little bigger, so it doesn't really matter if we do a couple half double crochets at the end without increasing. For me, again, because it had 38 and now I'm increasing to about 43, I repeated 6 half double crochets and 1 increase 5 times, and then I just half double crocheted 3 times at the end. Now we've reached the end of the round, and we're going to repeat half double crochets all the way up until we reach about just a couple centimeters below our shoulder. We don't want it to get up too high up to our shoulder. We just want to kind of touch where the shoulder is, and we're going to keep repeating the rounds until we reach up to there. I'll meet you back once I finish, and I'll see you when I have worked up to my shoulder. All right, so here is the finished product. I've worked about 10 centimeters, which is about 7 rows for me. Now that we finished the first arm, you can go ahead and go back to the beginning of the video and just repeat the exact same pattern for the second arm. Now that we have two arms, we can move on to the ribbing of the waist. It's going to be done the exact same way we did the ribbing of the wrist, except we'll add much more rows. The way that I did the waist ribbing is that I wanted to cinch a little at the waist and then become oversized as it goes up. So I made the waist to be exactly the same size as my waist. I didn't really add any extra. So let's start off with the foundation chain. We're going to do a slip stitch. And then of course, insert your hook into the slip stitch. And now chain 1, chain 2, chain 3, chain 4, chain 5, chain 6, chain 7, chain 8, and then I added a chain 9. So I made it longer for the waist ribbing. And again, from the second chain of the hook, you're going to half double crochet. So this is the exact same thing as the wrist ribbing, except an extra chain. So half double crochet, and remember you're skipping the second chain from the hook, and you can just continue down. That'll give you a total of 8 half double crochets for the foundation chain. Well, we already did the foundation chain, I mean for the second row. Right now I just have 3 more. That's 2, and then the last one. The repeat will be the same as the wrist ribbing, so just chain 2, turn, and then into the back loop only, do a half double crochet. So once again, that back loop is the one that's furthest away from you. And you're going to half double crochet 8 down. Alright, so now you just want to measure your waist and you just want to keep repeating the exact same row of chain 2 and then half double crochet down all the way until it goes snugly around your waist. If you'd like it a little bit oversized, you can add a little more rows. Okay, and I'll meet you back when I finish the rows and I'll tell you how to connect it together. I went ahead and finished it to make sure it fits around my waist. I have about 55 rows that I did, and I'm not going to connect it just yet. I'm going to leave that until the end. So unlike the wrist ribbing where we connected it, for this waist ribbing, you want to connect it after you finish your front and back panels. And the next part that we will be working on is the front panel. The thing is, the front and the back panel are going to be the exact same pattern. So whether it's the front or the back, it'll just be the exact same thing. So for this waist ribbing, I'm just quickly measuring it to make sure it's the exact same size that I want. And I just make sure to double check it around my waist too to make sure it's the exact same size. And again, if you want it to be a little more oversized, then you can just add more rows. If you want it to be a little more snug, you can just decrease the rows. Okay, and now we're going to start with the front panel. And of course, to do our trusty slip stitch, or slip knot. I keep saying slip stitch, I mean slip knot. And we're going to make a foundation chain. You want this foundation chain to be the same size as half of your waist, or if you were to measure from one shoulder to the other shoulder. Again, I want this to be oversized, and it's going to be a square, so it'll fit a little more tighter at the top than it will at the bottom, and it'll be a little more oversized at the bottom than it is at the top. When I finished doing the foundation chain, I had about 70 chains, and that was overall about 60, no, I think it was also around 75 centimeters. And that's just from one shoulder to one shoulder. You just make sure to measure out how much you want the front piece to be, because again, we're working this in two pieces. So just chain the foundation chain based on how wide or how narrower you want your sweater to be, based on if you want to be tight fitting or oversized. If you want to be more oversized, just add a couple more chains at the end. I want to be approximately half of the waist ribbing, a little bit further than half of the waist ribbing. You don't want to be exact because this is going to go from tight to big as it increases. So I checked it to about a little bit more than half of the waist ribbing. That's a good way to kind of gauge how long you'd like it to be, is to look at half of your waist ribbing and then add just a little bit more chains to it. Over here you can just see I'm checking it again, and I've had about a palm length of extra space after the waist ribbing. And if you have a measuring tape, go ahead and measure it just to make sure that it's the same size that you'd like. And sometimes what happens if you're like beginner into crochet, your foundation chain might be too tight or too loose, which will change the overall shape of or change the overall size of your sweater. So you just want to be careful to make sure that your foundation chain is a little bit on the looser side than it is on the tighter side. It's a good idea sometimes to just redo the foundation chain until you're satisfied with it, because once that foundation chain, you don't want to go in like 50 rows and then you realize, oh, the foundation chain was too tight. So it's better to just get it right the first time instead of like working up. And you want to count it just to make sure that when you're working the rows, every now and then you do want to count the rows to make sure that you haven't missed a stitch. So it's a good idea to always count your foundation chain, write it down on a note, and you can always refer back to it afterwards. Once you're satisfied with the number, we can now get started. From the second chain of the hook, so you're skipping that first one, you're going to do a half double crochet. And just like we've been doing all along, you're just going to half double crochet all the way down. I've just fast forwarded over here. Since it's so long, it did take quite a while to get through the foundation chain. I actually find doing the foundation chain to be one of the hardest because you don't really have anything to latch onto except for that foundation chain. And then you tend to kind of pull on it, which is really annoying. So that one always takes me longest. All right, and here we are, finished the foundation chain, or finished half double crocheting into that foundation chain. And you're just going to do a repeat of 2 chains, turn your work, and then half double crochet all the way down. You want to keep doing this until the length is from your waist all the way up to the bottom of your neck, or where the top of your shoulders end. And this is just going to be a straight rectangle down, because again, it's oversized. We're not going to have anything else that we're working in. It's just going to be a rectangle. And here I am. I just finished it. It's so big that I couldn't actually fit it into the frame. I'm just measuring it, and I think about, oh, here it is, 51 centimeters, and that was about 65 rows. And that measured out, not because it's going to have a wrist ribbing, wrist ribbing, sorry, it's going to have a waist ribbing. That waist ribbing is going to add a little bit of length. That's why when we do our front and back pieces, it's only starting from our waist to our shoulders. Once we attach it to that wrist ribbing, it'll give it more length, so it won't be as cropped. If you do want to crop, then you can just shorten the length. If you want it a little longer, just add a little more rows. You can go ahead and repeat the exact same thing for the back piece. It's the exact same. And over here, I'm just fastening it off, and I just cut it and then pull it through that loop and pull it tight. I keep a little bit of length so that I can go back in afterwards and use the excess yarn to put the two pieces together. Or you can also just weave them in right now or use them for extra, whichever one works. So right now I've used about 2 balls of this yarn. I bought 3 in total, and the pattern in the end ended up using about all of the 3 balls. So go ahead and repeat the exact same pattern for the back, and once you have 2, I'll meet you back. You also want to make sure that they're exactly the same. You're literally repeating the same thing. So you want to measure you want to measure your front, how long you'd like it to be, and then make a foundation chain as long as you'd like, and then just keep making rows until it reaches from your waist to your shoulder. So as you can see here, I'm taking both of them and I'm just measuring them against each other to make sure that they're the exact same amount of rows and that they're the same length. The next thing you're going to do is create a ribbing. As you can see here, I just made a ribbing, and it's going to be for the neck. You'll use the exact same pattern for the wrist that we did, so you can jump back to the wrist ribbing, and then you want to measure it around your neck so that it fits snugly. You don't want this to be too loose because then it'll look a little jaggy, but you want to make sure it just fits nice around your neck. As you can see here, I finished the neck and I just placed it right in the middle. You want to make sure that at the end of the neck ribbing, you have the same amount of centimeters on each side so that it's exactly in the middle. Now we're going to sew those parts together, not where the neck is. So just that area from the end of the neck ribbing to the shoulder on each side, we're going to sew or slip stitch together. I slip stitched them, or you could sew them, whichever one works best for you. And then I'll meet you back once I've finished closing the shoulder areas together. So I just finished putting them together, and now we're going to put together the neck ribbing. And as you can see, I've just placed some bobby pins around the area that I would like. What you want to do is that front panel is going to tie close to the front panel of the neck, and then you just sew it around. I also went ahead and sewed the arms. It's the same way as you sew the neck and everything else. You're just gonna put each of the front panels together and then the back panels together and then sew it down. And I'll show you how to do that over here too, in the one that I did not yet complete. And the way that I'm going to attach this is the same way that I attach the neck ribbing and the other arm. So this is the way that I usually attach when I'm putting 2 pieces together. The best thing to do for this is to put them into place with a bobby pin, so that as you're sewing or as you're slip stitching it together, you don't move it around. The only tricky parts when sewing these together are the top and bottom, so that little area where it curves at the top and curves at the bottom. But other than that, I just sewed it together. And over here is the waist ribbing. I actually ended up increasing my waist ribbing. I added about 5 more rows because I wanted it to be a little bit longer. I didn't want it to be just as tight. You can decide whichever one you'd like. So when I attached the waist ribbing, I realized that I was kind of out of the camera for most of the time, which sucks, but I'll try to explain what I was doing. All you're doing is you're attaching it in the same method that you did with the arms and the neck. So the front goes to the front and the back goes to the back. Except you're going to want to decrease, and the way that you decrease is the same as an invisible decrease or a single crochet 2 together, but you're taking it from the sweater panel, not from the wrist, not from the waist paneling. So you're going to decrease, so you're going to insert your hook into one of the stitches of the front panel or the back panel, depending on which one you work first. Then bring your hook over you can see it a little bit here, but again, I keep going off. Then you bring it over and put it into one of the stitches of the waist ribbing, and that'll decrease on the front and back panels. And you're going to repeat that. So yeah, 6 single crochets and then 1 decrease. And I went around that and it cinched in the clothing together and the waist. And that completes the whole look. And this is some of the pictures I took. And this is how it looks on me and when it's finished. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed. This was the first time that I've made a pattern or something to follow with a sweater, so it was a little bit of a first time. And I realized that, you know, sometimes I was off camera, which sucks, but I do plan on making more wearable crochet patterns on my YouTube channel, so stay tuned for that, and thanks so much. All right, if you finish your sweater and you'd like to show me, you can always visit me on my Instagram, which is @kaycrochay, or linked in the description box below. Thanks so much.